And welcome to New York State of Mind here on Com Radio. I'm Mitch Broder alongside Pat Tartaro. We got a lot to talk about today. Um, and you know what? Let's not even waste any time because Penn State football on Saturday against Maryland was let's just let's just keep it a buck. It was atrocious. It was really awful. I think that this is definitely the lowest point that it's ever gotten under James Franklin. This feels like rock bottom for this team. Not even the fact that they're 0-3, right? That's that in and of itself is really bad, but it's it's how they got to this point, right? Okay, so the Indiana game happens, and kind of a fluky game, even though they didn't play very well. I
Still
think
outgained them by like 250 yards. Like,
exactly. And ultimately, you can say what you want. That last 2 point conversion, maybe it was no good. But in the end of the day, Indiana's 3-0 and now in the top 10. So, maybe they're okay. You go to Ohio State. Now, obviously, listen, we'd love to sit here and really believe this team could beat Ohio State. And I think under normal circumstances, they could. But listen, they haven't beaten Ohio State since 16. So coming into the season, we all knew that was going to be a tough game. They lose that one, and I could stomach that one. But this game against Maryland this past weekend was I don't really know how to describe it other than just sad and just like depressing. And not just from like a fan perspective. When just watching the game, just the vibe from that sideline just seemed to be depressing. There seems to be such little confidence on Penn State's sideline. And I think we saw, especially in Sean Clifford, who I think had his worst game as a Penn State starter. And for all the people, I'll get this out of the way. For all the people that are saying, okay, you know, James Franklin's on the hot seat. This is another game. They've been unprepared. Blah. Listen, I still sit here and will defend James Franklin. I still don't believe that James Franklin should be fired or even really on the hot seat. But he does need to start answering some questions because this offense was terrible. The defense was terrible. And it just seems like the team is just lacking some juice, something, there's just something missing. And I think just have, Maryland come in, a team that hasn't sort of touched on you in 4 years, just demolish you. In the first quarter, the game was over. It was bad. It was bad. Pat, I want to get more of your thoughts on this game. I don't want to ramble on for too long because I easily could talk about this for an hour straight.
I mean, where do I start? I mean, you said it all. Like you said, first week, come out, Indiana. They missed 2 field goals. They have atrocious turnovers. They outgain Indiana still by almost 300 yards. They should have won the game, whatever. They played crappy. It was the first game of the year in a unprecedented season where the season was delayed, obviously, whatever, COVID-19, got it. I'll give you a pass. Ohio State, Justin Fields, Heisman contender, top 2 pick. Listen, they're a great program. We're obviously missing some of our best players, Penn State, that is. And listen, again, I could stomach that one, as you said. But this past weekend, I don't care how good Talia, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Tua's brother is, because he is impressive. I will give it to Maryland. It looks like they're starting to really turn that program around. I do not care because after starting out 0-2, if you want to hold yourself to the great program that you're saying you are, James Franklin, you need to come out and respond a little better. You can't have the game get out of hand in the first quarter. And I will put some blame on Franklin in this because listen, like it's just unacceptable to have them come into Beaver, which obviously no fans, but to just come out and destroy Penn State like that, it's just embarrassing. It really, frankly, is embarrassing. And I don't really care that they don't have Micah Parsons, Journey Brown, or Noah Kane. It's just unacceptable. Sean Clifford, 27 for 57 with a QBR of 29.5. That is one of the grossest stat lines I've ever seen in my life. I don't care that he had 3 touchdowns because they were down the entire game. It's just I don't even know what to say. Like, I really don't. Where do they go from here? Next week they got Nebraska. I'm not listen. I thought they'd win this Maryland game, but at this rate, I'm not really sure. In terms of James Franklin's job security, I don't think you could fire him. Obviously, I think it's ridiculous to say he's on the hot seat, especially when they just gave him a 5-year contract extension last year. However, I will say if they come out of the gate looking like this next year, then I actually do think his seat will start to get pretty warm because injuries and opt-outs and coronavirus or not, it's unacceptable for Penn State that's been a ranked team throughout the past 5 or so years to come out 0-3 and lose to a team that they've dominated the past few years in a fashion where it wasn't even close at all. It's just embarrassing.
I mean, and you pretty much nailed it on the head. And ultimately, when you look at this team, it's just and I think that this could be a fair point. As you mentioned with, opt-outs and injuries, I mean, this team did lose a lot of their best players, with obviously Micah Parsons, Noah Kane, Journey Brown. And then if you even want to look at guys who went to the draft early, although albeit we probably expected it, but with, KJ Hamler, that's a weapon.
Yeah.
And Yetur Gross-Matos, who's been, a all Big Ten kind of guy for, 2 straight seasons. But that being said, I mean, this team is just being essentially, I mean, especially in the offense, because this defense has been bad, and I'm not going to really, cut them any slack because
But they've been on the field the whole game because the offense can't get anything
right,
going.
right. I mean, and here's the thing too. I think that not a lot of people talked about, and I got to give credit to Zach Kaplan who did point this out after the season. Was Penn State's defense was the strength of that team last season, and they started to fall off towards the end of the year, and no one kind of talked about it. And I remember he just said, hey, like Brent Pry, defense coordinator, just let's keep an eye on him. Like that was a little concerning.
Yeah.
And the defense hasn't been good. No, you're right. They've been on the field a tremendous amount of the time. Time of possession has been terrible for Penn State this year. But again, for a unit that only lost, 3 starters, and that has so much talent just in general across, especially in that front seven, for them to struggle the way they've struggled, that has not been good. I think that Brent Pry might be on the hot seat. I've been very unimpressed with Kirk Soraka, the new offensive coordinator.
I was happy when they hired him too, but so far
the offense, and I understand that they're missing some firepower, and like ultimately, I think that through 3 games, I think Devin Ford is not a bad player, but he is not a number 1 running back in the Big Ten, and so I get that. But there's still some players on that side of the ball. I mean, obviously, Pat Freiermuth, that's a guy we probably expect to go in the first round of the draft. Jahan Dotson's proven that he can totally play in the next level. He's been awesome this season.
Yeah, like you said, that's been the one bright spot from this season.
Exactly. And even this true freshman, Parker Washington's been a nice player for them this year, too. He had 2 touchdowns this past week. But outside of those 3 guys, there's just nothing from that side of the ball. Nothing. And I really was surprised that Clifford didn't get benched at any point in the game last week. I know that Will Levis, who I personally don't really believe in, but the guy that I want to see at this point is why not go to Taquan Roberson, who was a pretty high recruit, dual threat quarterback that hasn't seen any game action since he came to Penn State outside of the spring game 2 years ago. So I think that they're going to have to figure out that position because Sean Clifford has not gotten it done, and he and Soraka are not meshing. I don't know whose fault that is, but clearly those 2 are not working well together because the product on the field has been awful now for 3 straight weeks.
I thought Clifford played a decent game against Ohio State given the circumstances because he was getting killed the entire time. But this past weekend, man, it was ugly. I turned off the TV. It was really ugly. I can't give him any. I have to give him all the blame for that. I can't excuse him at all. It's bad.
And I guess just like moving forward, I mean, like, because as of right now, this team isn't dead last in the Big Ten East. Do you think that this might be actually the worst team in the Big Ten East, or do you think that they'll win some games? Because I think right now, like, there's a real question if this team can even get a bid to a bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, are they the worst team in the Big Ten East?
I mean, I don't want to say yes, but they might be. Like, I can't say no. They haven't given me any reason, any evidence for me to suggest otherwise. So it's possible. I mean, I'm still holding out hope for them to come out strong next week, but I really thought that they were going to come out against Maryland and say, okay, we lost to Ohio State, we lost to Indiana, in which was we both don't really think Indiana is that all that in a bag of chips. We don't think they're that legit, but we really thought they'd come out against Maryland and just make a statement, kind of like we're still a legit program. We had 2 rough weeks, but we're gonna bounce back. But no, 0-3. We'll see where they go from here. But as of right now, you could certainly make that argument.
I think that the only team that I won't call them the worst team yet, because on paper they should be better than Michigan State. They should be better than Rutgers. But if they fall to 0-4, 0-5, 1-4, I think you have to start thinking about that they might be, Now, I will say this: if there were a year for Penn State to be down, I know this is incredibly down for Penn State football. I don't want to necessarily be so positive about this, because in the end of the day, they're 0-3, and that is just not acceptable for this program. At least it's a year where things are kind of screwed up, as you talked about with COVID. It's just been a weird season in general.
No tune-up games in the beginning where you could sort of see, like, figure out what you have. But like, at the end of the day, like, you're playing football, man. Just get on the field and play better.
Exactly. So, we'll see how this team goes, the direction they go in, but they've been so incredibly disappointing up to this point, and it was definitely something that I don't believe anyone really saw coming. So it's just kind of it's been a shocker, to say the least. But at the end of the day, I mean, all you need to know, like we said, the supposed strength of this team was going to be its rushing game and this ground attack. And against Maryland, they ran as a team for 94 yards, below 3 yards per carry, and never got in the end zone. So, I mean, there you go. This team just has not been playing good football. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the NFL, maybe a little bit more on college football. It's New York State of Mind here on Com Radio. And welcome back to New York State of Mind here on Com Radio. Mitch Broder alongside Pat Tartaro. And it's time to talk about the NFL. It was a busy week per usual in the National Football League. And I want to focus on, particularly right now, Tua Tagovailoa, who has been impressive, I got to say, to start his NFL career. I think his first game against the Rams, they really protected him. He didn't even throw for 100 yards. And no one really knew kind of what to think of Tua. But this game against Arizona was a statement that this guy can play in the National Football League. He looked really sharp. He was super accurate, mobile. He was exciting. And Miami, here they are. They're 5-3 and are not in a bad spot right here, to potentially make the postseason. I have been kind of shocked by them as a whole. I kind of thought that Miami was going to be competitive, but nothing too much. But, we criticized that move when they started Tua over Fitzpatrick, despite how, well, the team was playing with Fitzpatrick. But if they're going to get these kind of performances out of Tua, I know this is not going to be an every week thing because he's a rookie, and eventually, a defense is going to throw some things at him he's never seen before, and it could spook him. We've seen it, every year with rookie quarterbacks. But, I think you got to give Brian Flores some credit because they knew that Tua was ready, and it wasn't a matter of, oh, Fitz is good, let's just keep the ball rolling. It's if Tua's better and ready to play, what are we waiting for? Let's put him out there. And through 2 games, it's looked promising for the Dolphins.
Yeah, a lot of people came out and said that when they decided to start Tua, that this whole thing was sort of an experiment so they could see whether or not he would be or had any potential to be a good NFL franchise quarterback. And now we sort of see that they've seen stuff in practice that has warranted their decision to start Tua Tagovailoa because he looked really impressive yesterday. This game in general, I was honestly just glued to my TV because I love Kyler Murray. So just watching them two go back and forth was really exciting. Tua played a great game. He didn't really make any mistakes, I didn't think. Listen, I know you're a Bills fan. I know they look good. You got to watch out for this Miami team because they are legit. Their defense is good. And if Tua's playing, I know you said he's not going to play like this every week, but he showed some big play potential yesterday. If he stays healthy and keeps playing well, watch out for Miami because they could challenge for that division. Absolutely.
Listen, I still think that when it comes down to it, I still think the Bills will win this division just because I think top to bottom, there's a little bit more of a complete roster and they're just kind of ready. I think Miami is still kind of in the process of building and learning and growing, but don't get me wrong, Miami is not out of this thing at
Oh, yeah.
all. They totally could. I mean, listen, Miami's 2.5 games back in the division at the halfway point in the season. They still got plenty of football to play. I do think that Miami has got a really good chance of being in the postseason this year, especially with the way that the AFC's kind of been falling into place. I think that there are some really good teams up top in the conference, but there's not a lot of solid teams that are kind of in that next tier or two below, which is where I think Miami is, in kind of that 9-7, 10-6 range. But listen, Brian Flores has proven last year that he's a real coach. The moves they made over the offseason have paid off. And, I think that if you're going to get this out of Tua for the most part, the rest of the way, I mean, if you're Miami, keep on building around the guy. I mean, they have a chance to get Penn Sewell, who's considered to be, one of the best lineman prospects, in a long time, and continue to just make this guy successful because, as we saw kind of at Alabama with Tua, the dude's exciting. He's so accurate. He's athletic. And you can tell that his teammates really are out there playing for him. They want him to succeed and win. They he's a leader. And you know what? Like good for Miami. This is also another team that's not been great for a long time. Hasn't found a franchise quarterback since Marino. Has not had a lot of success on the 21st century, but they might have figured something out here. They're starting to really go in the right direction. And this was a game that Miami doesn't usually win, on the road against a good team on the West Coast. And credit to them because they came out and played a good game.
Yeah, I frankly thought Tua would play a little better in this game, but I certainly did not think that they'd come out with the win. So kudos to Miami. Great game from them. I do want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers because they are 8-0, but they did struggle yesterday with the Dallas Cowboys, who are obviously a depleted team. I had one of my friends text me and asked me to talk about this because he is a Cowboys fan and he thinks that they should have won the game. I just want to get your thoughts on that game yesterday.
I'll just say that the Steelers are lucky that they are still undefeated. They played the way they played, they deserve to lose. I just think the only reason they really won this game is just simply because the Cowboys are just depleted, especially at quarterback. I mean, I know Gilbert didn't play that bad. For all things considering, he was certainly better than DiNucci.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, I mean, the Cowboys are just kind of I don't want to say a mess right now, but they're kind of a mess right now. Actually, they're injured. McCarthy's not a good coach. But if I were the Steelers, I mean, someone brought up a good point, and it's like, yes, the Steelers are undefeated, but does anyone really think that the Steelers are the best team in the NFL? And to be honest, and I think they're a really good team, and I do think that they have a shot at the AFC, and they could go to the Super Bowl because when they're playing well, when that defense is on fire, then Big Ben's playing well, the offensive line's opening up running lanes for James Conner. Listen, they could beat anybody, but at the same time, there just seems to be something weird with the Steelers, especially the last 2 weeks. They've shown some real cracks that the Ravens exposed and the Cowboys exposed. I mean, they're not. I don't know if I sit here and can really confidently say that they're the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, listen. I said on last week's show, I'm still riding with the Chiefs. I know you still probably feel that way as well. They just have too many weapons. Like you said, Steelers are definitely still a contender to come out of the AFC. I'd put them right behind Kansas City, but they have shown, I think, throughout this little 8-game win streak that they've went on, they've shown a little tendency to sort of be a little inconsistent throughout games. Like they have some little dry spells offensively. Their defense is obviously great, but it will break at times. I don't think they're a sort of invincible team like their record suggests. I'll just put it that way.
I agree, but I will say this though: you got to give credit to Mike Tomlin. I know
Absolutely.
a lot of Steelers, he was on the hot seat a little bit after kind of that whole Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown era kind of ended. But I saw a stat that was impressive though. He has had 14 straight winning seasons now as a head coach. After as last uh, game clinched a at least a 500 season for him. So that's pretty impressive for Mike Tomlin. But I agree. I think that the Steelers team, although they're a very complete roster and they're a very good team, I think that they're just lacking some star power, especially on offense. Juju is, kind of the only guy that I think really scares defensive coordinators. I mean, I know Chase Claypool has looked great so far as a rookie, but he is still a rookie. And in the end of the day, he didn't do a ton last week. I actually had 8 catches. He was actually pretty good, but I don't know. I think that the Steelers, I think that they're, like I said, I think they're a pretty good team. I don't know if I could sit here and say they're the best team though in the AFC. But they definitely, I mean, listen, they're fortunate that they won last week.
I do want to ask you one more question before we move on from Dallas. If you were Dallas this offseason, would you consider trading Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup? Because you got CeeDee Lamb and you have 3 receivers who are all pretty good, but pretty good is an understatement. They're all really good. There's a lot of holes on the roster.
I think the problem with Amari Cooper, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't try to trade him. What team's going to take on that contract, though? I mean, I know he's really good, but when you put into perspective, I mean, he's getting paid if he's the elite of the elite in the league? I mean, he's getting paid the same kind of dollar values we're seeing, for DeAndre Hopkins of the world, and I don't think he's in that tier. I don't put him in the same category that I view Devontae Adams or Julio Jones. I think that he's a good receiver. I mean, call me a homer. I think I'd rather have Stephon Diggs than, frankly, Amari Cooper. And Diggs is about $6 million per year cheaper. So I just think that listen, I actually really like Michael Gallup. I don't think they should get rid of him. He's, to me, the most consistent receiver on that team.
So let's say you could get rid of Cooper, you would get rid of Cooper over Gallup.
If I could get some good compensation for him, if I could get a first, maybe 2 first-round picks, because keep in mind that they do need to clear some cap space. I know they just signed him, but they're gonna have to sign Dak, and they have holes. They need to fill in some holes on that defense. I think that they don't necessarily need him because you have Gallup, who I don't think is a number 1, but could be, who's an excellent number 2, and CeeDee Lamb's a guy we talked about could be, a superstar in the league at someday. And he showed some flashes last week. Yeah. So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I mean, I understand if you want to keep him, he's a great weapon, but they don't really need him, and they have other areas that are so depleted that they need help desperately in.
Absolutely.
All right, so I also want to talk about this Bills Seahawks game. I just want to say that I think I'll ask you this question. Do you think that performance hurts Russell Wilson's MVP consideration? Because he did have 4 turnovers in the game, which led to, pretty much all of the Bills, led to, I think 20 Bills points, which kind of was the difference in this game.
I mean, yes. However, I'm not expecting the guy to be perfect every single game. I honestly think it's more concerning to the Seahawks as a whole and their championship aspirations, because obviously they have arguably the best player in the league in Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf is a freak. He's a beast. Tyler Lockett, like you said, one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Their offense is great. There's no question about their offense. They're waiting for Chris Carson to get healthy. They're going to put up points. I know they struggled a little yesterday with Buffalo, obviously, but
still put up 34 points.
Still put up 34. I have no questions about their offense. No one should, because you have Russell Wilson. Even if the offensive line is just average, he'll make up for that.
And on top of that, I mean, their 2 best running backs are hurt, and they still put up a big game. So yeah,
for sure. the really big concern for Seattle, as it's been the whole year, is their defense. It is atrocious. I'm not taking anything away from Buffalo, but it just looked a little too easy out there yesterday. I'm sure you can agree. The receivers were streaking wide open the entire game, and that's been the story throughout the entire season. We saw the Patriots offense which has looked like it has had a very low ceiling, put up, I don't remember like 34 points on them.
Yeah, I mean Cam Newton threw for I think
like 400,
380 yards on them.
They made Cam Newton look like he was the MVP Cam Newton in that game, despite the Patriots not having many weapons on offense. That's the real concern, because they got Jamal Adams back yesterday, and he didn't seem to make that much of a difference, really. I know they traded for Dunlap. Okay, like that doesn't, I don't think that necessarily scares any other teams in terms of having a pass rush. That, I really think that is the Achilles heel for Seattle, because you're just as great as Russell Wilson is, because as we've seen, he could do it. He could keep you in games. He could single-handedly win you games. But to ask him to do it week in and week out, it's just tough. And I think that will ultimately be what comes back to bite them. I picked them to win the Super Bowl. Not feeling good about it right now.
Yeah, because that's the end of the day, is that this Seattle defense, I mean, they do stop the run pretty well. I think they're 8th in the league against the run, but
the pass is
their pass defense is historically awful. There's never been a team that has allowed more passing yards per game than the Seattle Seahawks so far in the NFL history. And I think that which people pointed out, Jamal Adams, right? That was the big acquisition they made, and they traded a lot to get him. And I think that Jamal Adams, although I do think he's a good player, he was awful in coverage against the Bills yesterday. I know he just came back from injury, but that I don't know Jamal Adams is truly a safety that can cover people. I mean, he got burnt a few times by a couple guys yesterday. I mean, it seems like that with Jamal Adams, he's just kind of a glorified linebacker at this point. He's good against the run. He's good against, rushing the passer, but in coverage, he was kind of a liability. And the rest of that secondary, they were missing Shaquille Griffin, who is their best corner, but still, I mean, they
just looked too easy.
Looked too easy. Yeah. I mean, and that's still a team that's got, ultimately, Jamal Adams, Shaquille Griffin, KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner, Carlos Dunlap, Snacks Harrison. I mean, those are some for real players who are like, high caliber Pro Bowl guys. And yet you would think they would at least be okay, fine. They're horrible. I mean, their defense is awful. And just to show how bad of a pass defense that is, I mean, the Bills, I believe that Josh Allen got sacked as many times, or almost as many times, as they had handoffs to their running backs. He got sacked 7 times, and they handed the ball off to their running backs 11 times. They threw it every play. And after the game, Pete Carroll said, we really thought they were going to run the ball more than that. But when you think about it, it's like, if you can't stop the pass, why would anyone ever run the ball in Seattle? I mean, they can't stop anything through the air. And I think that it's definitely something that could, is going to limit, I think, what they can do, because offensively and start stopping the run, it's there to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, this is a league that's about passing, right? It's all about passing. And if you can't be respectable against the pass at the very least, that's good luck winning in the playoffs when you got to go against the Saints, the Buccaneers.
Yeah, we'll get to them next, but
right. I mean, I just think that the Seattle team, yeah, like you said, they're winning the Super Bowl is not looking as good as it did earlier in the year. But I just want to say with Buffalo real quick, I thought that for them this was a good win. They were starting to, people starting to get a little unsure after not so great losses to the Chiefs and the Titans. But I thought that yesterday was a statement. When I tweeted, I said I think this was a statement win for them, and just kind of let the rest of the NFL know that, okay, you know what, when this team's playing well, they can really beat anybody, and they showed that yesterday. So I think that, is this a team that could win the AFC? I think it could. I don't know if I could confidently say they could beat, Kansas City in January, but this is a team that could make a run in the playoffs if things are going well for them.
Certainly legit. Definitely a bounce back win. after a few seasons where a few weeks where it seemed like they got a little off track. And I definitely think the return of John Brown really helped them yesterday. Let's transition into last night's Sunday night game, which I frankly think all of us thought was going to be just a little more competitive. I honestly had a different prediction. I thought the Bucks would win the game. Obviously, I was way off. I was not expecting them to get blown out and only score 3 points. I don't really know where to start, so I'll just leave it to you. What did you think about last night?
I would just say that Tampa Bay's offense looked horrendous. And I know that they've been good, but Tom Brady looked terrible. And I'm not, ringing the bell. Oh, Tom Brady's done. He's washed. What? The guy was an MVP. He's still an MVP candidate this season. But I mean, he threw 3 interceptions. His QBR was 3.8. His passer rating was 40.4. And I know I'm not the biggest believer in stats tell the story, but in this case, stats tell the story. He was terrible. And the Buccaneers ran for 8 yards. Ultimately, they had 5 rushing attempts. I just thought that they were completely outcoached by Sean. Bruce Arians got taken to the woodshed again by Sean Payton. Just like week 1, it just seemed like that they just were not on the same page as what the Saints were. And I think that you can't, the Buccaneers are still a really good team. They're still a playoff team. They're still a team you don't want to play in January, but getting swept by the Saints, I don't want to say kills their chances of the division, but it makes it tough for them to really win this division, which is what I think the goal was for this team, which is we should be the number 1 seed in the NFC this year. And I can confidently say, I think at this point, I don't really think they are the number 1 seed in the NFC anymore.
And it's funny because before the Monday night game against the Giants, me and you both agreed that they were the best team in the NFC. And when you look at the Saints' upcoming schedule, things are not looking good for Tampa because the Saints get the 49ers, who are obviously depleted, the Falcons, who are the Falcons, at Denver. I'd obviously favor them in that game. And then the Falcons and the Eagles after that before they play Kansas City. So if you're a Saints fan, things are really looking really good right now because you're sitting at 6-2 with the next 5 games all looking really winnable. For Tampa Bay, it just blew my mind because, when they played a close game against the Giants, I was like, oh, whatever. They were probably looking ahead to the Sunday night game because the Giants stink. And they had Antonio Brown. They have a ton of weapons, which on paper looks like they're unstoppable. And they looked terrible yesterday. The Saints were locking them up in all facets of the game. They could not get anything going on offense. Even in the red zone, they've been automatic this year, the Buccaneers, and they got stopped twice on 4 downs. They went for it on 4th down twice in the red zone within the 5-yard line, and they got stuffed. They got stopped both times. It was just a clinic. It was a coaching clinic by Sean Payton. Bruce Arians has to reevaluate how he wants to integrate Antonio Brown into this offense because, man, oh man, it just looked really bad. Despite all the talent that the Buccaneers have, they're going to have to learn how to gel and integrate all of those pieces in because it's not easy. Even though they have all that talent, it's not easy to integrate all those pieces in for an end product. But I certainly did not think they would lose 38-3. That shocked me.
And real quick, too, you're talking about the schedule for the Saints. For the Buccaneers, their schedule's not too bad to end the season, but their next 3 games aren't the easiest. Yeah. They do have to go at Carolina, I think. Listen, although they're 3-6, man, they
beat the Chiefs yesterday.
Played a tough game against Kansas City, and I'm a big believer in Matt Rule. He's got that team, despite they don't have a ton of talent, plays their tails off, and they could win that game. And then ultimately they got to play the Rams and the Chiefs. It's I just think that there could be some real separation between the Saints and the Buccaneers as far as the division race is concerned. With that upcoming schedule for Tampa Bay, it's not the easiest schedule, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But I was just kind of surprised by how bad they played after kind of struggling with the Saints week 1. You think at home, including Antonio Brown and the way they've been playing, that they would be at least competitive and have a chance to win the game. But it was It was a blowout by the end of the first quarter. The game was over.
Yeah, and I honestly, I haven't been that impressed with New Orleans up until this point.
Me too.
I did not think that they would come in and dominate it, just from the standpoint that I saw them go versus Carolina, barely beat them, barely beat the Chargers on Monday Night Football, and then barely beat Chicago in Chicago. I was not impressed with the Saints up until this point, but they came out and made a statement, and you got to give credit to them.
Definitely, for sure. And I guess, I mean, it's such an undesirable game, but it is the game tonight, and we do usually break down the Monday Night Football game. I mean,
I don't even know what to say. I mean, just Joe Flacco.
yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he's starting tonight.
Darnold's not even playing. It's Joe Flacco.
It's Joe Flacco versus Cam Newton. And I mean, it's a pretty bad matchup, to say the least. I mean, I think that I will say this though. Is this finally the game that the Jets win? Do they get their first win of the season? It is at home. I know there's no fans. It is at home. And New England does seem just very defeated, especially after that Bills game 2 weeks ago. If you saw Cam Newton after the game, he doesn't look like, not just as a player, he doesn't look like the guy Cam Newton that we're used to seeing, who's, energetic and positive. He just seemed very just down in the dumps.
I mean, listen, it's funny you say that, because I was talking to my roommate, and I actually did think the Jets were going to win this week until I heard that Sam Darnold was out. Now that Joe Flacco is starting, I have no confidence in that offense whatsoever to put up any significant amount of points on the board, because at the end of the day, like who are they giving the ball to, man? Like Frank Gore, like great player, Hall of Famer, but he's in his, I don't know, whatever season. Jamison Crowder, like they just don't have weapons. I don't trust Joe Flacco on that offensive line. I'll just go with the Patriots, because I just think that Belichick will coach them to a win.
Do you think the Patriots cover? They are 9.5-point favorites.
No, I actually don't think they will cover. I think it'll be a pretty close game, honestly. I don't think both the teams are bad. They're bad teams.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those games that I'm sure the NFL regrets making a primetime game this deep into the season. I mean, I feel like we all knew the Jets weren't going to be very good this year, but the Patriots, there was some hope they'd be all right. But yeah, I mean, listen, they're 2-5 for a reason. I mean, they're not particularly good, but I agree with you. I do think they win. I actually do think they'll cover. I think they're going to win by like 2 scores, 10, 14 points tonight. And it's not going to be because the offense plays a great game, just because the Jets, the last time we saw Joe Flacco at the quarterback position for the Jets was against the Dolphins 2 weeks ago, I believe, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I watched some of that game. It was hard.
And the Jets didn't convert a third down until, I believe, 10 minutes to go in the game. So, yeah, and hey, it's just my weekly reminder. How is Adam Gase still a head coach at this point in the year? Just throwing it out there. But listen, if the Jets want to continue with him, by all means, do it if you want. But I don't really know what's going on over there, to be honest. Real quick though, I do have to ask you, your Giants did win. I know that it was once again Washington, which appears to be the only team that Daniel Jones can beat for some reason.
Yep.
Just give me your quick thoughts on the game.
Listen, the Giants throughout this season, I came into the year saying I wanted them to be competitive. And what week are we in right now? Week 8?
Week 9.
Week 9. I'd say 7 out of their 9 games, they've been right there. They were right there with Tampa. I frankly thought they should have beaten Tampa. I mean, I suppose that's the thing with bad teams. They lose games that they're supposed to win, but they've been in almost all of their games. Yesterday was not pretty, to say the least, but they got it done. I'm hoping that they could go beat Philly this weekend, because I really think Philly is beatable, and I think that they should have beaten them the first time. But another win for Joe Judge. Listen, I'm not that ecstatic from it, just simply because, like you said, it's Washington, and the Giants are, I think, 6-0 against Washington. Their last 6 times they played them. It's frankly the only team that they could beat throughout the past few seasons. So I'm looking for them to get on the board against another division rival that's not the Washington football team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will say, I think the biggest thing I take away from this game is Austin Mack was kind of a nice little surprise right there.
Yeah.
A rookie from Ohio State who was pretty good last year before he got hurt, which is when Chris Olave kind of became a name. in college football, but he's pretty good. I still think, and we talked about this after that Buccaneers game, you know, although Daniel Jones didn't technically have a turnover, he still fumbled it twice.
Yeah.
He still he got sacked 5 times. Like, I still have my concerns about Daniel Jones as a long-term option for the Giants. And I mean, listen, they're doing what they need to do, is just let him play and just evaluate it, because, worst case scenario, they move on from him and try again. But um, I'll just say with Daniel Jones, because like I mentioned, he's really only beaten Washington in his career. He's gonna eventually have to beat somebody else just to kind of prove to the rest of the, to not just the Giants, just the rest of the league, that this is a guy that is a legitimate starting quarterback who can win your team games. Because of right now, I mean, I know wins aren't necessarily the best quarterback stat, but ultimately, I mean, Daniel Jones has just not won very many games in his career, unfortunately. So, I mean, I hope he's good. I'm rooting for the guy, but
Listen, I have my questions too. You're totally valid right now.
So we'll see with him, but I did want to throw that out there just because they did win, and hey, it's a victory Monday for the Giants too. So you might as well savor it while it's here.
Yeah.
And hey, that's all the time we got here today. It's been a pleasure. I will be back on same time as usual, 6:15 on Monday next week.
I believe next week's our last week in Innovation Park, correct?
You're right. We're going to be going back offline as campus is shutting down for break and for permanently for the rest of the semester. So if you don't follow us on YouTube, please do. We'll be posting weekly episodes on there, and we'll probably tweet about that as well to keep you updated. Other than that, though, for Pat Tartaro, I am Mitch Broder. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.